Hello, my name is Emmett Dorsey, 29 years old. I am an urban planner living in Bozeman, Montana, a small town nestled at the foot of the Bridger Mountains where endless grassy plains blend with the scent of pine and crisp air, even on summer days. Bozeman is nothing like Scottsdale, Arizona, where I was born and raised, with its scorching asphalt roads and blinding sunlight that seems to burn everything in its path. Here, life moves at a slower, more intimate pace, as if time deliberately pauses to let people catch their breath. I moved here a few months ago for work, a decision I initially thought was just a stepping stone in my career, but now I realize it's changing the way I view family and even myself. Bozeman is not just my new workplace. It's also where my grandmother, Velma Dorsey, lives in a tiny wooden house on the edge of town, with weathered wooden fences and a backyard garden filled with wildflowers she meticulously tends. Grandma, a 76-year-old woman with silver hair neatly tied back, deep brown eyes, and a smile that carries a hint of resilience, is a remarkable figure. She single-handedly raised my father and his two twin sisters after my grandfather passed away in a workplace accident at a steel construction site when she was 36. I have no memories of my grandfather, only knowing him through the stories Grandma tells, her voice always gentle but tinged with a profound sadness, as if each word is carefully picked from the fragments of broken memories. Grandma is a strong woman, so strong that I sometimes wonder if anything in this world could ever break her. Alone, she raised 3 children, ensuring they received a proper education and grew up to be successful. My father, Terrence Dorsey, is now the CEO of a chain of luxury hotels, always busy with business trips and hours-long phone calls. My mother, Jeanette Dorsey, a former Arizona State beauty queen, is now a renowned interior designer, always appearing in glamorous dresses with a perfect smile. My father's 2 sisters, Lila and Lena, are my mother's best friends and admire her lavish lifestyle. They live in big cities, drive expensive cars, and rarely return to Bozeman. From the outside, my family is the perfect picture of success. But beneath the surface, there are cracks I only began to notice after moving here. Since arriving in Bozeman, I've started visiting Grandma more often. Her house is on a small dirt road about a 15-minute drive from the town center. Each time I visit, I bring some freshly roasted coffee from the shop on the corner, a flavor she loves despite her protests. You don't need to waste money on an old lady like me. But I know she enjoys the coffee, the way she sits on the porch, sipping it slowly while gazing out at the distant fields, as if searching for something in the past. Afternoons at Grandma's house have their own rhythm. I help her weed the garden, water the wildflowers, or cook simple meals together, usually potato soup or cornbread, which she says was your grandfather's favorite. She often talks about him, about their younger days when he worked on the steel site and she took up sewing to make extra money. Those stories never get old, no matter how many times I've heard them. Once she told me about the day Grandpa fell from the scaffolding, her voice calm but her hands gripping the edge of the table, as if holding back an old pain. Your grandfather used to tell me, Velma, if anything happens, you have to keep going for the kids. And I did, she said, her eyes looking far into the distance. But what pains me most isn't the stories of the past. It's how she lives now, alone and forgotten by the very children she devoted her life to raising. My father, mother, and aunts are all consumed by their busy lives. During holidays, Grandma receives only express-delivered gifts, an expensive bottle of perfume, a silk scarf, or a carefully packaged fruit basket, all cold and impersonal. No one visits, no one calls, just short messages like, Merry Christmas, Mom, or Happy New Year, stay healthy. I used to think this was normal, that busy lives make everyone like this. But when I see the look in Grandma's eyes as she opens those packages, I notice a quiet sadness, as if she's trying to convince herself she hasn't been abandoned. My mother, the eldest daughter-in-law, is the hardest for me to understand. She gets irritated whenever I mention Grandma. Why do you keep visiting her? She's old. Let her live her life, she once said coldly, her hands still scrolling through work emails on her phone. I don't understand why she feels this way. Mom is always impeccable, from her perfectly styled hair to her glittering high heels. She takes pride in our family, in what Dad has built, in the empire she and my aunts have created. But Grandma, the woman who laid the foundation for it all, is seen by Mom as irrelevant, a quaint old lady not worth bothering about. Dad is different, but not much better. He rarely mentions Grandma, and when I try to bring her up, he brushes it off with short remarks like, "She's fine, don't worry," before switching to work topics. I remember once asking why he doesn't bring Grandma to live with us in Scottsdale. He gave a wry laugh and said, "Your grandma is stubborn. She prefers that old house. Besides, her rustic lifestyle wouldn't fit with ours." My heart sank hearing that. The house he called old is the one he grew up in, where Grandma stayed up countless nights sewing to pay for his and his sister's education. Yet now she's seen as a burden, someone who doesn't fit with the family's glamorous lifestyle. My younger brother Zane, 2 years my junior, isn't any better. He works at a high-end car dealership in Scottsdale, always bragging about the cars he sells or the wealthy clients he meets. Like Mom, Zane loves showing off, always dressed in expensive suits and flashy watches. Whenever I suggest he visit Grandma in Bozeman, he laughs and says, "I'm too busy." Besides, what's fun about Grandma's house? I'd probably fall asleep listening to her old stories. I don't know how to respond, only feeling a sense of helplessness well up inside me. The more time I spend with Grandma, the more I realize the generational gap between us isn't just about age. It's about how my family views her worth. To them, she's a relic of the past, something that no longer fits in the present. But to me, she's a living story, a woman who fought her entire life to hold her family together, only to be turned away by that same family. I've started noticing small details, the way she pauses mid-story to sigh, the way she looks out the window whenever a car passes by, as if hoping someone might show up. But no one does, except me. One afternoon, while helping her weed the garden, she suddenly asked, "Emmett, do you know what family means?" I looked up, surprised by the question. It's the people who love and live for each other, right, Grandma?" She smiled, but it was a sad smile. Sometimes family is also the ones who hurt us the most. But don't let your heart grow heavy. I'm old, I'm used to it. I wanted to say something, to tell her she didn't deserve to be treated this way, but my throat tightened. I only held her hand, frail but warm, and silently vowed to myself that I wouldn't let her be alone anymore. That promise, though quiet, has become a small, smoldering flame in my heart. I don't know where it will lead me, but I know I can't keep standing by, watching how my family treats Grandma. In the days that followed, I made an effort to visit her more often, despite my busy work in Bozeman with planning sketches and long meetings. Each time I see her, I'm struck by her quiet resilience, but also by the loneliness she hides behind stories of the past. I've started to wonder, has she accepted her children's coldness as an inevitable part of life? One evening, as I returned to my small apartment after a long day at the office, my phone rang. The screen displayed my father's name, Terrence Dorsey. I frowned, not because it was unusual for him to call, it wasn't, but because it was nearly 9 p.m., a time when he typically didn't reach out for casual chats. My father is a man of schedules, everything neatly arranged like the hotel rooms in his luxury chain. I picked up, my voice slightly cautious. "Hello, Dad?" "Emmett," his voice came through curt and cold as if delivering a memo. "There's a family meeting in Scottsdale this weekend. We're preparing for Zane's wedding. Make sure you're there, but don't tell Grandma." I froze, my grip tightening on the phone. His words hit me like a stone to the chest. "Don't tell Grandma?" I repeated, my voice trembling, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "Why shouldn't she know?" There was a brief silence, then a sigh, as if I'd asked something foolish. "She doesn't need to know. This wedding is important with high-profile guests. Her presence would only complicate things. You understand, right?" I didn't respond immediately. My mind reeled, trying to process what he'd just said. Grandma, the woman who raised him, who sacrificed her youth so he could have the life he has today, was considered a complication. A quiet anger simmered within me, but I held it back, keeping my voice steady. Dad, she's Zane's grandmother. How can we not invite her? Emmett, his tone turned icy. Don't make this complicated. She's old, she doesn't fit in at events like this. Just do as I say. Be in Scottsdale this weekend, Saturday at 7 p.m. at our house. Then he hung up, leaving no room for me to say another word. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone mocking me. Outside the window, the faint moonlight cast a glow over Bozeman's quiet streets, and a sense of unease welled up inside me. Why hide this from Grandma? Zane was getting married, a major family event, yet she, the one who should be at the heart of this joy, was being deliberately excluded. I thought of her sad eyes, the way she held my hand in the garden, and my heart ached. No, I couldn't ignore this. The next day, I drove to Grandma's house. The Bozeman sky was chilly, with gray clouds drifting lazily over the Bridger Mountains. Her wooden house came into view at the end of the dirt road, a wisp of smoke curling from the chimney, a sign she was cooking something in the kitchen. I stepped inside, greeted by the warm aroma of freshly baked cornbread, and there was Grandma, as always, standing by the stove, her worn apron tied around her waist. You're here, Emmett? She turned, her smile warm, but her eyes tinged with fatigue. Sit down. I just finished baking. Want some coffee? I nodded, but my mind was still haunted by last night's call. I sat at the old wooden kitchen table, watching her pour coffee from the copper kettle she'd used since I was a kid. I wanted to tell her about the call, about Zane's wedding, but each time I opened my mouth, I hesitated. What would it do to her to know her children were intentionally keeping her in the dark? What would it feel like to face yet another wound? Finally, I couldn't stay silent any longer. Grandma, I began, my voice wavering, this weekend I have to go to Scottsdale. There's a family thing. She nodded, not pressing for details, and placed a cup of coffee in front of me. I see. Visiting your parents. Say hi to them for me. I bit my lip, guilt flooding me. Grandma, I think you should come with me. She looked up, her brown eyes flickering with surprise. Come with you? Why would I drag myself all the way to Scottsdale? You know I'm not fond of cities. I took a deep breath, deciding I couldn't keep this from her any longer. It's Zane's wedding, Grandma. They're planning it, but I paused, my throat tightening. They don't want you to know. The air in the kitchen grew heavy. Grandma looked at me, a flash of pain crossing her eyes, but she quickly masked it with a faint smile. Oh, is that so? Zane's getting married. That's wonderful. The bride must be lovely, right? Her voice was calm, but I noticed her hand tremble slightly as she held her coffee cup. Grandma, I don't agree with this, I said, my voice firmer. You're Zane's grandmother. You deserve to be there. I want to take you. She shook her head, setting the cup down. No, Emmett, don't make a fuss. I'm old. I don't need to intrude on the young folks' affairs. No, Grandma, I nearly shouted, startling her. This isn't about intruding. This is about family. I don't want you to be treated like this anymore. She looked at me, her gaze softening, though still hesitant. Are you sure, Emmett? I don't want to be a bother to anyone. I'm sure, I replied, taking her hand. Come with me. I'll take care of everything. She was silent for a moment, then nodded, a faint smile returning to her lips. All right. If you say so, I'll go. I left her house that afternoon with a mix of relief and tension. Relief because she'd agreed, but tension because I knew the upcoming family meeting wouldn't be easy. I didn't tell my parents or Zane that I was bringing Grandma. Part of me wanted them to be caught off guard, to face the reality that they couldn't keep pretending she didn't exist. But another part of me was afraid that this decision might make things worse. Saturday came faster than I expected. I drove to pick up Grandma early in the morning, helping her pack a small suitcase with a few simple outfits. She wore a dark green wool dress and the old fur coat she'd kept since Grandpa's time. Do I look all right, Emmett? She asked, her voice tinged with nervousness as I helped her into the car. "You look beautiful," I said, smiling. "Like a queen." She laughed, a rare sound I hadn't heard from her in a while. "You sure know how to flatter your old grandma." The drive from Bozeman to Scottsdale took nearly 12 hours. I'd considered flying, but Grandma said she preferred watching the scenery, and I didn't want to deny her that. We stopped at a few rest areas, eating sandwiches and drinking coffee from a thermos. She shared more stories about Grandpa, about their younger days, and I realized each story was her way of keeping him alive in her heart. I listened, driving while feeling a warmth in my chest, but also a heaviness. I was taking her to a place where I knew she wouldn't be welcomed. As we arrived in Scottsdale, the sun was dipping toward the west, casting a golden glow over the wide streets lined with towering palm trees. My parents' house sat in an upscale suburban neighborhood, a modern mansion with large glass doors and a perfectly manicured lawn. I parked in front of the gate, my heart pounding. Grandma sat beside me, her hands gripping the seatbelt, her eyes fixed on the house as if preparing to step onto a battlefield. "Are you ready, Emmett?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. I turned to her, taking her hand. "I'm ready, are you?" She nodded, her resilient smile returning. "I'm ready too." We stepped out of the car and I carried her small suitcase as we walked through the gate. The house was aglow with lights, the faint sound of piano music drifting from within. I knocked, and when the door opened, there stood my mother in a striking red silk dress, her perfect smile lighting up her face. But that smile vanished the moment she saw Grandma standing beside me. "Emmett," she said, her voice stiffening. "What is this?" "She's family," I replied, my tone calm but firm. "I brought her for the meeting." Mom glanced at me, then at Grandma, a flicker of irritation in her eyes. "Fine," she said coldly. "Come in." We stepped into the living room where an air of sophistication enveloped everything. A crystal chandelier sparkled overhead, and the long dining table draped in white silk was laden with exquisite dishes, lobster, steak, and salads tossed with some gourmet dressing I knew Mom had ordered from an expensive restaurant. Dad sat at the head of the table, a glass of wine in hand, talking to Zane. My aunts Lila and Lena stood near the bar, laughing with a few unfamiliar guests, likely Zane's friends or the bride's family. Zane, in a sleek gray suit, looked like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, telling a story that had everyone laughing. But as Grandma and I entered, the room fell silent. The laughter stopped and all eyes turned to us. Zane stood abruptly, his expression flustered. Dad set his wine glass down, his brows furrowing. Lila and Lena exchanged a glance, then looked at me, their eyes questioning what I was doing. "Emmett," Dad said, his voice low and warning. "Why did you bring her here?" I felt a rush of heat to my face, but kept my composure. "She's Zane's grandmother," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "She has every right to be here, Dad." Grandma stood beside me, silent, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I could sense her breathing, slow but heavy, as if she were holding something back. Mom stepped closer to Dad, placing a hand on his shoulder, her voice soft but sharp. "Terrence, let's not make a scene. Mom, sit down. Let's get started." I guided Grandma to a chair at the corner of the table, helping her settle in. She gave me a small smile, but I saw the unease in her eyes. I sat beside her, trying to shield her from the unwelcoming stares directed our way. The room felt tense, like a taut string, and I knew this dinner would be anything but an ordinary family gathering. Dad stood, raising his glass, his professional smile returning. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice resonant. "Today is a special occasion to prepare for Zane and Juliana Ames's wedding. A wonderful girl we'll soon welcome into the Dorsey family." Everyone clapped, but I noticed no one looked at Grandma. Zane smiled, but his eyes avoided both me and her. Lila and Lena whispered to each other, giggling softly. Mom stood beside Dad, her sharp gaze seeming to control the room. I felt a quiet anger simmering inside me, but I held it back, waiting. The dinner began, Dishes were served, and the clink of silverware against porcelain plates filled the air. People discussed the wedding, the venue, the guest list, the menu, and the dress Juliana had chosen. I listened, but my focus was on Grandma. She sat quietly, hands resting in her lap, occasionally nodding when someone spoke near her, but no one truly engaged her. I tried to draw her into the conversation, asking about weddings in her day, but each time she started to speak, Mom or one of my aunts quickly changed the subject. Then, as the meal neared its end, Dad stood again for the formal discussion. "We need to plan the wedding to perfection," he said. "Juliana wants a modern, elegant ceremony with high-profile guests. We need to ensure everything goes smoothly." For the first time since arriving, Grandma spoke. Her voice was soft but clear. "When I got married, we had a small ceremony at the church, but everyone was happy. Maybe Zane and his bride could consider something cozy, closer to family." The room fell silent. I looked at her, a swell of pride rising in my chest. But then, Mom laughed. A sharp, cold laugh that made my heart clench. "Velma," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "You're a widowed old lady from the sticks. What do you know about modern weddings? Your time has long passed." My face flushed with anger. I looked around hoping someone, Dad, Zane, or my aunts, would defend her. But no one did. Zane stared at his glass, pretending to be occupied. Dad took a sip of wine, avoiding eye contact. Lila and Lena seemed unbothered by Mom's insult. The air in the room felt frozen, and I saw Grandma lower her head, her hands trembling in her lap. "Enough, Jeanette," Dad said, his voice mild but emotionless. "You're old, Mom. Just stay home and rest. This wedding is for the younger generation." Lila chimed in, her tone teasing but cruel. "Exactly, Mom. A modern, classy wedding isn't suited to your rustic lifestyle." Lena laughed loudly, adding, "If you showed up, the guests might think we're from the Stone Age." The room erupted in laughter, except for me and Grandma. I looked at her, seeing her eyes glisten, but she remained silent, enduring it quietly. Mom, with a smug smile, delivered one final blow. "If you attend, the bride's family will look down on us. Just stay home. You'd only cause trouble." I couldn't take it anymore. I stood abruptly, the wooden chair scraping loudly. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice echoing. The room fell deathly quiet. All eyes turned to me, but I didn't care. "What are you all saying? This is Grandma, the woman who raised Dad, raised you aunts, who sacrificed her entire life so you could have what you have today. And you dare talk to her like this?" Dad stared at me, his expression darkening. "Emmett, sit down. What are you doing?" "No, Dad," I shot back, my voice trembling with fury. "I'm not sitting down. I can't believe our family is treating her like this. She's family, but you treat her like she's disposable." Mom stepped forward, her voice soft but cutting. "Emmett, you're being too sensitive. We just want what's best for Zane's wedding." "Best?" I snapped. "Hiding the wedding from Grandma, not inviting her and humiliating her in front of everyone, that's best?" Zane, speaking for the first time, looked at me with irritation. "Emmett, don't make a scene. This is my wedding. Are you trying to ruin it?" I turned to Zane, my heart pounding. "Zane, you're her grandson. Don't you feel ashamed hearing them talk about her like this?" Zane didn't respond, just lowered his head, fidgeting with the ring on his finger. No one stood up for her. No one apologized. The room was cloaked in suffocating silence, broken only by the faint piano music from the speakers. I turned to Grandma, seeing her still sitting there, head bowed, hands clasped tightly. My heart felt like it was breaking. I couldn't let her stay here a second longer. I stepped over and gently helped her stand. "Grandma, let's go," I said, my voice choking. She looked at me, her eyes tinged with pain but still resolute. "Emmett, it's okay, I'm fine." "No, Grandma," I said, holding her hand tightly. "I'm not letting you stay here to endure this any longer." I led her out of the room, past the stunned and silent gazes of my family. As I opened the door, I turned back, looking directly at Dad, Mom, Zane, and my aunts. "If Grandma isn't invited to the wedding, I'm not coming either," I declared, my voice ringing like a vow. The door closed behind us like the final note of a mournful song. I helped Grandma into the car, my heart still pounding with anger and sorrow. As I started the engine, she placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you, Emmett, but you didn't have to do that for me." I looked at her, tears welling in my eyes. "You deserve to be treated with respect. I did it because it's the right thing." She smiled, a sad but loving smile. "You're more like your grandfather than you know." We drove away from Scottsdale in the blazing red sunset, leaving behind the lavish house and the people who had forgotten the meaning of family. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing. I would never let Grandma endure such humiliation again. The highway stretched out before us, the headlights sweeping across sparse palm trees and the barren desert plains. Grandma sat beside me, silent, her frail hands resting in her lap, her gaze fixed out the window. I glanced at her, searching for any sign of hurt, but her face remained calm, as if the insults hurled in that room were merely a passing breeze. Yet I knew deep down she couldn't be unaffected. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, the anger still smoldering in my chest. My family, Dad, Mom, Zane, my aunts, had made me feel like a stranger, as if I no longer belonged to them. "I'm sorry, Grandma," I said, my voice hoarse, breaking the silence. "I didn't expect things to turn out like this." She turned to me, a faint smile on her lips. "It's not your fault, Emmett. I'm used to it. People sometimes forget what matters most, especially when they think they have everything." I wanted to say something, to tell her she didn't deserve such treatment, but my throat tightened. Instead, I turned on the radio, letting an old country song fill the space. The singer's voice crooned about days gone by, small houses and simple dreams, making me think of Grandma, her wooden house in Bozeman, and the way she preserved every memento from Grandpa's time. I wondered if she had chosen this quiet life to shield herself from the pain my family inflicted. We stopped at a rest area about 2 hours from Scottsdale. I bought 2 cups of hot coffee and a bag of cookies from the convenience store, then sat with her on a wooden bench outside. The desert night was colder than I'd expected, and I draped my jacket over her shoulders. She smiled, patting my hand gently. "You're so much like your grandfather, Emmett. He used to fuss over me like this too." I smiled, but my heart felt heavy. "Grandma, I just want you to be respected. I don't understand how they can act this way." She sipped her coffee, her gaze distant. "I don't blame them. I just hope you don't let your heart grow heavy." I nodded, but the anger inside me hadn't subsided. I couldn't accept how my family treated her, and I knew I had to do something to change it. For now, though, I just wanted to get her back to Bozeman, to her warm wooden house where she could find peace again. 2 days later, we were back in Bozeman. I helped Grandma unpack her suitcase and brewed a pot of hot tea. She sat in her old armchair, the one she said Grandpa used to sit in every evening to read the newspaper. I was about to stay a bit longer when her phone rang, a rare sound in her quiet home. She frowned, reaching for the old phone on the table. "Who's calling me at this hour?" she muttered, then answered. "Hello?" Her voice was gentle but hesitant. I stood to leave, giving her privacy, but she gestured for me to stay. I heard a young woman's voice, soft but professional, coming through the speaker. "Hello, Mrs. Velma, this is Juliana Ames," the voice said clearly. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I'm calling to invite you to my wedding. I'd be so honored if you could make time to be there." I froze, my heart racing. "Juliana Ames? Zane's fiancée?" I looked at Grandma, trying to read her expression, but she only smiled, her voice steady. "Thank you, Juliana. I'm delighted to be invited. But are you sure? The groom's family, do they agree?" Juliana laughed softly, her tone sincere. "You're my guest. I'm inviting you because I want you there. You inspire me, Mrs. Velma, from the way you built your real estate portfolio to the way you've lived your life. It would mean so much to me if you came." I could hardly believe my ears. "Real estate portfolio? Grandma?" I stared at her, my eyes full of confusion. but she just shook her head slightly, signaling me to stay quiet. "All right, Juliana," she said warmly. "I'll be there. Thank you for calling." When she hung up, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Grandma, what's going on? Juliana Ames. She knows you? And what's this about a real estate portfolio?" Grandma laughed, a light, knowing laugh. "Sit down, Emmett. I think it's time you learned a few things." I sat down, my heart pounding as if I were about to uncover a major secret. Grandma took a sip of her tea, her gaze distant as though sifting through old memories. "I'm not just some rustic old lady like your family thinks," she began, her voice slow and deliberate. "After your grandfather passed, I had to find a way to raise 3 children. Sewing wasn't enough, so I started buying old houses, fixing them up and renting them out. Over time, I built up a small portfolio of properties. Not much, but enough to live comfortably. Juliana manages that portfolio for me. She's very good at her job and I trust her." My jaw dropped, unable to believe what I'd just heard. You own properties? And Juliana knows? But why didn't you tell anyone? Dad, Mom, Zane, they don't know anything about this." She smiled, but there was a trace of bitterness in it. "They never asked, Emmett. They think I'm just an old woman living in a rundown wooden house not worth their attention. I didn't want to boast either. What I did for the family, not for recognition." A wave of emotions surged through me, shock, pride, and anger. Grandma, the woman my family looked down on, was a remarkably capable woman who had quietly built a fortune no one knew about. And Juliana, Zane's fiancée, not only knew her but admired her. What stunned me most was that Juliana didn't even know Grandma was Zane's grandmother. She had invited her as a business partner, an inspiration, not as family. "Grandma," I said, my voice trembling, "I can't believe this. You're truly an incredible woman." She reached out, gently ruffling my hair as she did when I was a child. "Don't say that, Emmett. I just did what I had to do. But now if Juliana has invited me, I'll go to the wedding. Will you come with me?" I nodded without hesitation. "I'll go, Grandma. And this time I'll make sure no one disrespects you again." In the days that followed, Grandma and I quietly prepared for the wedding. I took her to a small tailor shop in Bozeman where she chose a silver-gray silk dress, simple yet elegant. I booked a room at a hotel near the wedding venue in Scottsdale and rented a luxury car to drive her there. Every step of the preparations was kept secret, no word to my parents or Zane. I wanted them to be caught off guard, to face the reality that Grandma wasn't just the rustic old lady they thought she was. In the meantime, I learned through some acquaintances that Juliana Ames was a young, intelligent woman running a small but reputable real estate brokerage. She had met Zane at a charity event and they got engaged quickly. But what intrigued me was how she spoke of Grandma, with respect and admiration. I wondered if she knew the truth about my family, about how they treated her. One evening, while I was at Grandma's house helping her go over the schedule, she suddenly looked at me with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Emmett, what do you think of Juliana?" I blinked, caught off guard by the question. I haven't met her, but from what you've said, she seems kind." She chuckled, a knowing smile on her lips. "I think you should meet her. That girl has a good heart, and I think you two might get along." I laughed, thinking she was joking. "Grandma, she's Zane's fiancée. What are you talking about?" She just shrugged, saying nothing, but her look left me puzzled. There was something in her tone, as if she knew a secret I couldn't yet grasp. I shook my head, pushing the thought aside. My focus was on one thing: getting Grandma to the wedding and ensuring she was treated with respect. As the wedding day approached, I felt a strange mix of anticipation. It wasn't just about protecting Grandma. I was also curious about Juliana, about how she'd react when she learned the truth about Grandma. I looked at Grandma, now ready in her silk dress and the old fur coat she couldn't bear to part with. Her silver hair was neatly combed, her eyes alight with a vitality I rarely saw. She was no longer the forgotten old woman, but a resilient figure, ready to walk into the wedding with unshakable dignity. I started the car, Grandma sitting in the back with a composed air. Zane's wedding awaited us, and I knew this time things wouldn't go as my family expected. Another storm was coming, and I was ready to face it. On the drive to Scottsdale, Grandma shared more about her journey of building her wealth. She spoke of sleepless nights calculating rental income, of the times she fixed plumbing or repainted walls herself to save money. "I never thought I could do it," she said, her voice low and steady. "But every time I wanted to give up, I thought of my children, of your grandfather. I couldn't let him down." I listened, driving while my heart swelled with admiration. Grandma wasn't just a mother or a wife. She was a silent warrior who had built a legacy from nothing. And my family, Dad, Mom, Zane, my aunts, knew none of it. They thought she owned a few worthless patches of land. But the truth was she held dozens of properties, from small apartments in Bozeman to valuable lots in the suburbs. All were in her name, managed by Juliana. Yet no one in my family had ever cared enough to ask. When we arrived in Scottsdale, the sun was high, illuminating the luxurious resort where the wedding was being held. The entrance was adorned with white silk ribbons and roses, with cars lining the lot. I helped Grandma out of the car, noticing the curious glances from a few guests as they saw her, an elderly woman in an old fur coat, but with an unmistakable air of dignity. I helped Grandma out of the car. She stood tall, gently adjusting her coat as if preparing to step onto a grand stage. I took her hand, feeling the warmth of her frail fingers, and reminded myself once again that today I was here to protect her, to ensure no one could hurt her again. The resort's main hall glowed with light, crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and white floral arrangements meticulously placed on every table. The soft strains of a violin mingled with lively chatter, creating an atmosphere of opulence that I knew my family had poured their hearts into crafting. I led Grandma to a table marked with a small, elegant card reading Velma Dorsey, written in ornate calligraphy, no doubt arranged by Juliana. As we sat, a few curious glances followed us, but I paid them no mind. My focus was on Grandma, on the way she delicately sipped juice from a crystal glass, her eyes scanning the room with remarkable composure. "What do you think of the atmosphere, Emmett?" she asked, a playful note in her voice. "Very extravagant," I replied, smiling. "But I'm only here for you." She let out a small, warm laugh. "You sure know how to make me feel at ease." But that moment of warmth didn't last long. As I glanced around, I saw my parents and Zane enter through a side door. Dad, in a sleek black suit, looked like a king surveying his domain. Mom, shimmering in a sequined gown, walked beside him, her perfect smile ever present. Zane, the groom, wore a crisp white tuxedo, his hair slicked back, but his eyes were tense. When they spotted Grandma, all three froze as if doused with cold water. "Emmett," Mom said, striding toward us, her voice low but sharp. "What are you doing? Why did you bring her here?" I stood, facing her, keeping my voice steady. "She was invited, Mom. Juliana personally invited her." Mom frowned, her gaze flicking to Grandma and back to me. "Juliana? That's impossible. This is Zane's wedding, not a place for you to stir up trouble." "Stir up trouble?" I repeated, my voice trembling with rising anger. "Mom, Grandma and I aren't here to cause trouble. She's an honored guest of the bride. I expect you to respect her." Dad stepped forward, his expression darkening. "Emmett, that's enough. You're ruining your brother's big day. Take her home." My blood boiled, but before I could respond, Zane cut in, his voice laced with frustration. "Emmett, I told you not to make a scene. What's Grandma doing here, to make our family a laughingstock?" I turned to Zane, my heart pounding. "A laughingstock? Zane, you're talking about our grandmother, the woman who raised Dad, who gave you this life. Aren't you ashamed to say that?" Grandma placed a hand on my arm, her voice soft but firm. "Enough, Emmett. I don't want the family fighting here." The air was taut, the glares from Dad, Mom, and Zane piercing through me. Nearby guests began to notice, whispers rippling through the room. My heart raced, not from fear but from a burning resolve. I wouldn't let Grandma be pushed aside again. At that moment, the main doors swung open and Juliana entered. She wore a pristine white wedding gown, its train gliding across the floor, her blonde hair swept up with a delicate, sparkling tiara. She was beautiful, not in the ostentatious way my mother was, but with an elegant, natural grace like morning sunlight. What struck me most was her eyes, sharp, confident, and determined. When she saw Grandma, her face lit up and she hurried toward us, ignoring the curious stares of the guests. "Mrs. Velma," Juliana called, her voice brimming with joy. "You're here. I'm so glad." Grandma stood, smiling warmly. "Thank you, Juliana. I'm honored to be invited." Juliana took her hand, her eyes shining. "No, I'm the one who's honored. You're my greatest inspiration. Without you, my company wouldn't be where it is today." I watched, my heart racing. Dad, Mom, and Zane stood nearby, their faces a mix of confusion and shock. They had no idea what was happening, and neither did I fully, but I sensed a shift coming, like a tidal wave about to break. "Juliana," Mom interjected, her voice sweet but wary. "What are you talking about? Velma is just Zane's grandmother." Juliana turned to Mom, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "Zane's grandmother?" She looked at Grandma, then back at Mom, as if piecing together a puzzle. "I didn't know, but Mrs. Velma owns the real estate portfolio I manage. She's one of the smartest investors I've ever worked with. Without her trust, my company would have gone under long ago." The room fell silent, as if time itself had paused. I glanced at Dad, Mom, and Zane, their faces shifting from confusion to disbelief. Dad set his wine glass down, his mouth slightly agape. Mom stood rigid, her perfect smile gone. Zane stared at Juliana, then Grandma, his eyes wide with bewilderment. "Juliana, what are you saying?" Dad asked, his voice unsteady. "Zane's grandmother has a real estate portfolio?" Juliana nodded, her gaze still fixed on Grandma with respect. "Yes, Mr. Dorsey. Mrs. Velma owns over 30 properties across Montana and Arizona, from residential homes to commercial land. I've worked with her for over 3 years, and I've learned so much from her, not just about business, but about patience and integrity." My heart felt like it stopped. 30 properties? I knew Grandma had assets, but I hadn't realized the scale. I looked at her, standing there calmly, her eyes gleaming with quiet pride. My family, those who had mocked her, called her rustic, now stood frozen, speechless. But then Mom broke the silence, her voice sharp with anger. "If she has all this wealth, why didn't she say anything? Why let us think she was just some penniless old woman?" Grandma looked at Mom, her voice calm but pointed. "Jeanette, I didn't need to boast. I did everything for my children, for my grandchildren, but you never asked, never cared. I don't blame you, but I also don't need your validation." Mom fell silent, a flicker of shame in her eyes, though she quickly regained her haughty demeanor. "So why are you here? To show off?" Juliana stepped forward, her eyes icy. "Mrs. Velma doesn't need to show off, Jeanette. I invited her because I respect her, because of what she's done for me and my company. But seeing how this family treats her, I'm disappointed, truly disappointed." The hall seemed to hold its breath, the silence suffocating, broken only by the faint violin in the background. I looked at Juliana, my heart pounding. She wasn't just defending Grandma, she was confronting my entire family, fearless. Zane stepped forward, grabbing her hand, his voice panicked. "Juliana, what are you saying? This is our wedding." Juliana pulled her hand away, looking straight at him. "Zane, I love you, but I can't marry into a family that doesn't respect its own. Mrs. Velma is your grandmother, yet you let her be humiliated. I can't accept that." She turned to the curious crowd and stepped onto the podium, her voice ringing clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for the interruption, but I've decided to postpone the wedding until the groom's family learns to respect their own." Whispers erupted like a wave through the hall. My parents stood stunned, unable to believe their ears. Zane looked at Juliana, his eyes frantic. "Juliana, are you crazy? You can't do this." "You're wrong, Zane," she replied, her voice resolute. "I can, and I will. I'm sorry to everyone, but I can't proceed knowing this truth." From the corner of the hall, Juliana's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ames, stood up. They had witnessed everything. Mr. Ames, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, held his wife's hand. Mrs. Ames, in an elegant emerald dress, covered her mouth, tears glistening. But a faint smile showed her respect for her daughter's decision. Mr. Ames joined Juliana on the podium and spoke. "We raised a daughter who stands up for what's right. I respect her decision. Our sincere apologies to all the guests. The wedding is postponed for now. However, you're welcome to stay and enjoy the reception with our family." Juliana hugged her father, then stepped down, still in her pristine wedding gown, and walked to Grandma. "Mrs. Velma, I'm so sorry for what you've endured. I invited you to honor you, not to see you insulted. I'd love to take you to dinner if you're willing." Grandma smiled, taking Juliana's hand. "Thank you, Juliana. I'm touched." I glanced at my parents and Zane, their faces pale, humbled, and ashamed, but unsure how to salvage their pride. Aunts Lila and Lena were likely hiding in a corner, relieved they hadn't been called out. Juliana and I helped Grandma leave the hall. Eyes followed us, but I didn't care. As we stepped outside, the afternoon sun glinted off Juliana's gown, making her look like an angel. We got into the car and drove to a small nearby restaurant. Its cozy, simple atmosphere a stark contrast to the lavish resort. As we sat at the table, Juliana still in her wedding gown, a few waitstaff gave us curious looks. One even said, "Congratulations to the happy couple. Is this the bride's grandmother?" Juliana and I laughed, while Grandma smiled, her eyes twinkling with mischief. We ordered dinner, simple steaks, mashed potatoes, and a bottle of red wine. Juliana told me about her company, how Grandma had trusted her with the real estate portfolio when she was just starting out. "Mrs. Velma was the first to give me a chance," she said, her eyes shining. "I'll never forget that." Grandma looked at Juliana, then at me, her smile full of meaning. "I told you, you two would get along." I laughed, but a strange feeling stirred inside me. Juliana wasn't just Zane's fiancée. She was an extraordinary woman who saw Grandma's worth, and now she was here, sitting with me, part of a story I never could have imagined. The dinner at that small restaurant was a rare moment of calm amidst the storm that had just passed. The soft golden light bathed our table, where we shared plates of steak and mashed potatoes. I sat there, feeling a warmth in my heart, but also a whirlwind of emotions. Juliana wasn't just intelligent and strong. She had a heart that valued what my family had overlooked. I watched her, her eyes sparkling as she spoke about her work, her dream of building a real estate company rooted in integrity. There was something about her that held my gaze, though I reminded myself she was Zane's fiancée, or at least she had been. As dinner ended, Juliana took Grandma's hand before we parted, her voice sincere. "Thank you, Mrs. Velma. Today I learned so much, not just about you, but about myself." Grandma hugged her, a warm, motherly embrace. "You're a strong girl, Juliana. Don't let anyone make you doubt that." As Juliana left, Grandma turned to me, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "What do you think of her, Emmett?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Grandma, you're teasing me again. She's Zane's fiancée." She shrugged, her smile full of meaning. "I'm old, but I know people. Just wait and see." The drive back to Bozeman the next day was calmer than I'd expected. Grandma sat beside me, gazing out at the scenery, occasionally sharing stories about Grandpa. But I sensed a change in her. No longer the quiet sadness, but a silent pride. Yesterday she had stood before my family, not to boast, but to prove she wasn't someone they could dismiss. When we reached the wooden house in Bozeman, I helped Grandma carry her suitcase inside. She settled into her old armchair, looking at me with warm eyes. "Thank you, Emmett. Without you, I don't know if I'd have had the courage to go there." I knelt before her, taking her hand. "I'm the one who should thank you, Grandma. You taught me that family isn't just blood, it's the people who stand up for each other." She smiled, gently ruffling my hair. While Grandma and I had, in some way, reclaimed justice, news of the postponed wedding spread like wildfire. A small article appeared on social media describing Juliana walking out of the wedding in her gown, alongside Grandma and me. "Bride postpones wedding due to groom's family disrespecting grandmother," read the headline, sending Scottsdale into a frenzy. The bride's family, especially Mr. and Mrs. Ames, were praised by the press for supporting Juliana's decision. Meanwhile, my family became the target of criticism. "The Dorsey family mistreated the woman who raised them," read one online comment, leaving me both satisfied and heartbroken. Dad called me the next evening, his voice seething with anger. "Emmett, what have you done? You've let the world laugh at our family. Do you know how this affects my business?" "I didn't do anything wrong, Dad," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "I stood up for Grandma. If you're ashamed, you should ask yourself why." He hung up, and I knew he wouldn't forgive me easily. But I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I felt I was doing the right thing, even if it meant standing against my entire family. In the days following the postponed wedding, I received an email from Juliana. It was brief. "Emmett, thank you for standing up for Mrs. Velma. If you're in Scottsdale, can we meet?" I read it over and over, my heart racing. There was something in her words, simple, sincere yet compelling, that made it impossible to say no. I replied, suggesting a small coffee shop in downtown Scottsdale. When I arrived, Juliana was already there, dressed in a white sweater and jeans, her blonde hair loosely tied back. Gone was the glamorous bride. She was now a down-to-earth, approachable woman. She smiled when she saw me, and I felt a strange warmth spread through my chest. "Thanks for coming," she said, sliding a coffee toward me. "I just wanted to talk about Mrs. Velma and what happened." We started chatting, at first about Grandma, her properties, and how she helped Juliana launch her business. But soon the conversation shifted to other things. My childhood in Scottsdale, Juliana's upbringing in a small Colorado town, her dream of a world where people are valued for their true worth. I told her about afternoons weeding Grandma's garden, and she laughed heartily when I described Grandma's stubborn attachment to her old fur coat. "You're more like Mrs. Velma than you realize," Juliana said, her eyes sparkling. "You have a heart that stands for what's right, not just for blood ties." I smiled, but her words left me unsettled. There was something in the way she looked at me, the way she spoke, that made me feel like I was standing at the edge of a new path, one I hadn't considered walking. In the days that followed, we began talking more frequently, through emails, texts, and occasional short calls. Each conversation drew me closer to Juliana, as if an invisible bond was forming, slow but profound. She shared the challenges of running her company, the pressure from Zane's family after the wedding postponement. I opened up about the tensions in my own family, how distant I felt from my parents and Zane. One evening, Juliana texted, "I want to be loved by someone who stands for what's right, not just for blood." "What do you think about that, Emmett?" My heart raced as I read it. I wanted to reply immediately, to say I understood, that I too craved a relationship built on respect and sincerity. But I only typed, "I think that's the most important thing, Juliana, and I believe you deserve it." Our connection grew, slow but steady. But then word of my contact with Juliana reached Zane. One morning he called, his voice brimming with anger. "Emmett, what are you doing? Getting close to Juliana, my fiancée?" "Zane, she's not your fiancée anymore," I replied, trying to stay calm. "She postponed the wedding, and I haven't done anything wrong." Zane's voice turned sharp. "You're my brother. How could you do this? You're tearing this family apart." I took a deep breath, feeling both anger and exhaustion. "Zane, I'm not tearing anything apart. I'm just valuing someone who stood up for Grandma, something you and the family couldn't do." Zane hung up, and soon after my parents called, demanding I come to Scottsdale immediately. When I arrived, the atmosphere in their mansion was colder than ever. Dad sat in his armchair, his gaze icy. Mom stood beside him, arms crossed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Emmett, how could you get involved with your brother's fiancée? Have you lost your mind? I looked at them, my heart heavy but resolute. I'm just doing what I believe is right. Grandma was disrespected by this family. Juliana was the only one who stood up for her. I respect that. Mom let out a sharp laugh. Respect? You're betraying your brother for a girl you just met. It's not betrayal, I said firmly. If standing up for what's right for the people I care about is seen as betrayal, then I'll accept that. Dad stood, his eyes full of disappointment. You're isolating yourself from this family, Emmett. You'll regret it. I looked at them, feeling an unbridgeable gap. If family means staying silent in the face of wrong, then I don't need that family. I left the house, my heart heavy yet relieved. For the first time, I felt I was living true to myself, unbound by my family's expectations. And in my mind, Juliana's image, her sincere smile and strong heart, grew ever clearer. In the days that followed, I decided to leave Scottsdale and return to Bozeman to be closer to Grandma. It wasn't an easy decision. My urban planning job in Scottsdale was stable, but I knew I couldn't keep living in a city filled with painful memories. Grandma's wooden house with its wildflower garden and the scent of cornbread had become the place where I felt I truly belonged. I requested a transfer to the Bozeman office, where small-town development projects needed people like me. My colleagues were surprised, but I just smiled and said, I want to be near family. Family to me now was no longer my parents, Zane, or Aunts Lila and Lena. They had chosen their path, one driven by status and wealth. I didn't blame them, but I couldn't walk that road anymore. Family, as Grandma once said, is sometimes the people you choose. Those who stand by you out of love, not just blood. I began working with Juliana, helping her manage Grandma's real estate portfolio. In the afternoons, we met at her small office in Bozeman, where maps and contracts covered the desk. Juliana was passionate and meticulous, from reviewing lease agreements to ensuring Grandma's properties were well maintained. I admired her not just for her talent, but for the way she saw the world, with sincerity and a belief in doing what's right. Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, Emmett? She asked one day as we inspected an old house on the outskirts of Bozeman. I laughed, shaking my head. Not really, but working with you and Grandma, I'm starting to find it interesting. Grandma's quite the teacher. Juliana smiled, her eyes bright. Mrs. Velma is special. She taught me that wealth isn't just money, it's what you build for others. Her words made me pause and look at her. There was something about Juliana that made me feel safe, like I could share anything without fear of judgment. We started meeting more often, not just for work. In the evenings, she'd come to Grandma's house, bringing a bottle of wine or a box of pastries from her favorite bakery. We'd sit around the table, sharing simple meals with Grandma, potato soup, cornbread, and stories that stretched late into the night. One day, as Juliana helped Grandma wash dishes in the kitchen, Grandma turned to me, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Emmett, I told you, you two get along. Now do you see I was right? I laughed, my face warming. Grandma, you're at it again. Juliana, standing by the sink, turned with a mock frown. Mrs. Velma, what are you scheming? Grandma let out a hearty laugh that filled the small kitchen. Family isn't always where you're born. Sometimes you have to choose it. And I see you two choosing right. Her words left Juliana and me silent, our eyes meeting. In that moment, as her gaze locked with mine, my heart raced. It wasn't just Grandma's words, it was the realization that she was right. Juliana wasn't just a friend or a partner. She was becoming a vital part of my life, someone who made me want to be a better version of myself. In the weeks that followed, Juliana and I grew closer. We walked Bozeman's dirt roads, talking about everything from dreams to deep-seated fears. She told me about the struggles of starting her business, how she once feared she wasn't good enough. I shared my years growing up in a family that placed expectations on me but never truly understood me. Each conversation felt like a piece of my heart falling into place. Grandma watched us, her satisfied smile growing more evident. One evening after Juliana had left, she called me into the living room where she sat with a cup of tea. "Emmett," she said, her tone serious, "family is the people who make you feel at peace. I see you at peace with Juliana. Don't let that slip away." I nodded, a sense of certainty spreading through me. "I understand, Grandma, and I won't let it slip away." A year passed like a dream. Juliana and I decided to hold our wedding not in a lavish resort, but right in Grandma's garden in Bozeman. There were no white silk ribbons or crystal chandeliers, just the wildflowers Grandma had planted, a small tent set up for the occasion, and our closest friends. Grandma sat in the front row wearing her silver-gray silk dress, her old fur coat draped over her shoulders, a radiant smile of contentment on her face. My old family, my parents, Zane and aunts Lila and Lena, didn't attend. I had sent invitations but received no replies. I wasn't surprised, nor was I saddened. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. Our wedding was small, simple, but filled with love, and that was what mattered most. When Juliana stepped out in a simple wedding dress with a train that glided lightly over the grass, my heart felt like it stopped. She smiled, her eyes sparkling, and I knew I had found the person I wanted to spend my life with. The ceremony took place under the sunset, with the breeze rustling through the fields and the laughter of friends filling the air. Grandma stood raising a glass of wine, her voice clear and resonant. "Today I'm truly happy, not just because you two are getting married, but because you've chosen to love and respect each other. That's all I've ever wanted." After the ceremony, when the guests had left, Grandma called Juliana and me into the house. She pulled an old key from a drawer and placed it in our hands. "This is the key to a house I bought 20 years ago," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Every brick in it holds my dreams. Now it's yours." I looked at the key, a lump rising in my throat. Juliana squeezed my hand, tears glistening on her cheeks. "Thank you, Mrs. Velma. I promise we'll cherish it." We hugged Grandma, the three of us standing in the small kitchen where the faint scent of cornbread lingered in the air. I looked out the window, seeing the sunset glow beyond the porch, and for the first time I felt a complete sense of peace. I no longer needed validation from my old family. I had Juliana, I had Grandma, and a house that held the dreams of a woman who had fought her entire life to preserve her dignity. As we left Grandma's house that evening, Juliana held my hand, her eyes shining under the moonlight. "Are you happy, Emmett?" she asked. I smiled, pulling her close. "Happier than I ever thought possible, Juliana." We walked down the dirt road, the moonlight guiding our way, and I knew this was just the beginning. A home, a new family, and a story we would write together.